Back in 1803, the United States pulled off the deal of a century, basically doubling its size with the Louisiana Purchase. But turns out, buying the land was the easy part. Actually governing it, well, that was a completely different can of worms. So today, we're going to dive into this grand, kind of chaotic experiment. How do you turn a foreign land into a uniquely American place?
I mean, seriously, put yourself in Thomas Jefferson's shoes. This was the exact problem he was facing. He hadn't just bought empty land. He'd acquired a place with its own deep history, a population that was incredibly diverse, and traditions that were totally alien to the young United States. So the question was, where do you even start?
Now, the Purchase presented these incredible opportunities, right? Control of the Mississippi River, the huge port of New Orleans, and just endless room to expand. But with all that opportunity came some massive challenges, and it all started with the people who already called this place home.
Just look at the mix of people in the territory of Orleans. It was this incredible mashup of French, Spanish, and Creole residents, a growing number of American settlers, and large populations of both free and enslaved Africans, not to mention various indigenous groups. This wasn't some kind of simple melting pot. It was more like a collection of distinct cultures, languages, and religions, all living side by side. It was unlike almost anywhere else in America at the time.
And if managing that internal cultural landscape wasn't enough of a headache, the U.S. immediately inherited another major problem. It now shared a long, really poorly defined, and very tense border with Spanish territories.
Yeah, the big problem was nobody could really agree on where the Louisiana Purchase actually ended and Spanish Texas began. And this wasn't just some mapping issue. No, this was a constant source of tension that was always threatening to boil over into an all-out war between the United States and Spain.
So, to keep things from exploding, military leaders on both sides came up with this temporary fix in 1806. They created a buffer zone, this neutral ground, between the Sabine River and the Arroyo Hondo. The idea was pretty simple. Neither country would occupy it or govern it. It would just be a no-man's land to keep their armies apart.
But what happens when you create a piece of land with no government and no laws? Well, it quickly becomes a magnet for anyone trying to escape authority. The neutral ground filled up with this volatile mix of settlers, criminals, revolutionaries, and people who had escaped slavery. So instead of solving the border problem, the agreement accidentally created one of the most lawless regions in all of North America.
So, beyond all the external conflicts happening on the border, there were even more complex struggles happening inside the territory. We're talking about a major clash of cultures between the folks who'd been there for generations and their new American rulers.
And to really understand this clash, you have to understand the Creoles. Now, this term referred to people born in the Louisiana colony, who could be of European, African, or mixed heritage. The point is, they had generations of their own traditions. They spoke French or Spanish, and they had a culture that was completely distinct from the English-speaking Anglo-American world. Can you just imagine the shock the Creoles must have felt? I mean, one day, you're living under familiar French and Spanish systems. And the next, this new American governor, William C.C. Claiborne, issues a proclamation that basically says, "Hey everyone, everything you knew is over. We're in charge now." And that right there was Governor Claiborne's central dilemma. He was tasked with imposing American-style democracy and law on a population that was, let's be honest, deeply skeptical, often hostile, and fiercely protective of its own way of life. Faced with all this resistance, Claiborne's administration realized they had to get creative. They knew they couldn't just come in and erase decades of history. Now, instead, they had to build something totally new, a government that was part American and part Louisiana.
So what did they actually do? Well, instead of forcing the American county system on everyone, they kept the familiar French and Spanish parish as the local unit of government. And even more radically, they decided to try and merge two fundamentally different legal systems into one.
And these systems were, truly different. The French and Spanish use civil law, which is based on ancient Roman law, where laws are all written down in a comprehensive code by a legislature. The United States, on the other hand, used English common law, where judges' decisions and the precedents from past cases play a huge role in shaping the law. They're just two completely different ways of thinking about justice.
And the result of this massive, messy compromise was the Civil Code of 1808. And this wasn't a victory for one side over the other. It was a genuine collaboration between Creole and American leaders. They created a hybrid legal system that, believe it or not, still exists in Louisiana to this day.
So all of these compromises, as difficult as they were, ended up paving the way for the next logical step. After years of navigating cultural clashes and border disputes, the Territory of Orleans was finally on the path to becoming an American state.
And get this, by 1810, the population had swelled to over 76,000 people. That was more than enough to meet the requirement that Congress had set for a territory to apply for statehood. So despite all the turmoil, Louisiana was growing, and fast.
But that final road to statehood was anything but smooth. It was marked by intense violence, like the German Coast Uprising in 1811, the largest revolt by enslaved people in U.S. history, which was brutally suppressed. And yet, the push for statehood just kept going, and within just over a year, Louisiana went from passing its Enabling Act to adopting a constitution and then officially joining the Union.
So, who was this new state actually being built for? Well, the 1812 Constitution, which was written in both French and English, gives us a very clear answer. It explicitly limited the right to vote to white, tax-paying men. It formally locked in a power structure that excluded all women, free people of color, and the entire enslaved population from having any voice in their own government.
You know, this entire territorial period, from the chaos of the neutral ground to the compromises made in the courtroom, it all forged a state that's truly unlike any other. Louisiana wasn't simply absorbed, it was integrated in a way that left a permanent, unique mark.
And you can still see the legacy of this era everywhere in Louisiana today. It's the only state with parishes instead of counties. It's the only one with that blended civil and common law system. Its entire cultural identity is a product of this complicated and often tense period of compromise.
In the end, the story of Louisiana's journey to statehood leaves us with this fascinating question that's still so relevant today. How does a nation absorb new people and new cultures without just erasing them? Louisiana's story offers one possible answer, a mix of force and accommodation, of conflict and cooperation. It's a messy, imperfect answer for sure, but it's one that's written into the very fabric of the state itself.